Thank you all for joining us today. You are at our January Lunch and Learn, which is going to have a focus on Artists Activate, participatory art programs at public gardens and beyond. And I would like to thank you for choosing to attend today. If you would like to talk with the presenters or with each other, please feel free to use the chat function. However, if you have any questions for the presenters during the presentation, please navigate to the Q&A function, which is down at the bottom of the screen. And put your question in the Q&A function. And this helps us to basically be able to see it a little bit easier and make sure that it gets answered during the live Q&A period. Questions put in the chat are a little bit more difficult for us to navigate to and find, so they may get skipped over. Also, I would like to draw your attention to the fact that this presentation does have closed captioning enabled, and so feel free to turn on or off your closed captioning as desired. I would also like to mention that our February Lunch and Learn is going to be on February 3rd, first Wednesday of the month at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. And we'll be focusing on when nature goes viral, bringing the outdoors to a K through 12 digital audience. And that'll be presented by Christy Weber with the Chicago Botanical Garden. But without further ado, I'd like to introduce Karen Daubmann, who is the Associate Vice President for Exhibitions and Public Engagement at the New York Botanical Garden, and Kristin Calhoun, who is the Public Art Director for Regional Arts and Culture Council at Portland, Oregon. So I'm going to turn it over to them and hope you enjoy.
I'm going to kick it off with 10 minutes or so, and then Kristin will chime in, and then we'll be happy to answer your questions at the end of the session. So Kristin and I didn't really know each other very well. We've gotten to know each other more in the past couple of days, but we were brought together to do a panel for the June 2020 APGA conference. And the session was selected and we were happy to get going on it. And we all know what happened to that conference. So we're happy that we're able to pull this together for everyone and present components of it today, in a smaller format. And we're hoping that there's some really rich discussion that follows and that you get a little bit of inspiration from us. Our goals are really very similar, but our delivery is much different. And I'm really excited to see Kristin's slides later. She's got a really big community component. NYBG, everybody knows, is a little bit more sort of institutional and a little slow to turn the corner. And she's doing some cool stuff. So we'll hear about that shortly. So at NYBG, we want to connect people to plants and to expand our visitors' view of the natural world throughout the garden's 130-year history. The scope of what is presented to visitors has really varied. Think 130 years ago is very much old school sort of flower shows to bring the community in. Now more than ever, a visitor needs to not physically be on site to sort of take in our offerings. So we're looking at a lot more digital efforts as well. But in 2007, that's when our exhibition program, as it's really known today, was launched. And we showcased changing exhibitions in multiple venues throughout the garden's 250-acre campus. Each of our exhibitions aims to highlight the multiple arms of the garden's mission: horticulture, education, and science. Someone might actually come to the garden for beauty or respite or an escape. And we hope that they will end up leaving with a broader knowledge of what we do, especially of our conservation work that our scientists are engaged in throughout the world on a daily basis. Our early exhibitions, this is 2007, 2008. Our early exhibitions focused on art as a beautiful backdrop in front of which programs, classes, or passive engagement would occur. Engagement and interaction was counted really by noticing if visitors were taking pictures or if they were reading sign text. And there's a lot of evaluation that's done that way, where you literally spy on visitors and see which signs they're reading and where they're taking photos. And that's sort of how you gauge what someone's particular interest in a topic is. Our shift in exhibitions really happened when we started asking for feedback and asking for help in shaping future exhibitions. This exhibition space has been used for exhibition prototyping. And the questions asked in this particular space are, which spices are significant in your cultural traditions? And is there a food or drink that makes you feel at home? And so we got tons of responses to those questions. And that's sort of a little witty one, but I love that a child was able to go through this exhibition with their parent and learn more about different spices. And although soda is not really a spice, it is something that makes them feel at home. So we've learned a lot from giving visitors the opportunity to interact with what we do. And this particular show sort of fell off the docket recently. We're hoping to do a bigger Morocco show, but we are considering it again in the future. And I think working through some of these questions helped us to develop some plans and some themes for a larger audience and larger exhibition. I think where the participation has been really wonderful, and our participation is definitely an evolution. It's been slow coming at the garden, changing from that viewing to really interacting. But where we were really successful with this was with Brazilian Modern, the living art of Roberto Burle Marx. And so what I'm showing right now is what people typically come to the garden for, is like the beautiful sort of jaw-dropping immersive experience. If you look closely, the little blue dots within the photo are signage and interpretation. That's some are sort of calls to action, some are, click to learn more, click to go to our mobile guide. So there's information within the exhibition, but we were able to create an even more participatory experience in our science galleries, where we were able to dig into Roberto Burle Marx, the plant rescuer, the plant researcher, the plant grower, the plant lover. And by using the lens of his home and his studio, giving our visitors an opportunity to think about what his life was like and think about the research that he was doing in the world. So this is one of the, I think one of the most successful, maybe heartwarming exhibitions. As you can see, visitors were asked to sit down at the table. They learned more about azuelo tiles and what they looked like in Burle Marx's home. Each of the panels on the floor had more information about his life collecting and living with plants. And we had to, every Monday when we're closed to the public, keep moving tiles up with a lift to the top of the ceiling. And it was more successful than we imagined it would be. What also was really exciting about this particular exhibition, it really tied together the three-part mission of the garden, was that conservation was a theme that was even highlighted on our website as part of the exhibition. And our science gallery totally transformed from a collection of cases of material that was sort of stagnant to very sort of modern research that our scientists are conducting in the field every day. The TV monitor had current information about deforestation. And when the forest fires were going on in the Amazon, they're still ongoing, we were able to really use interpretation and this exhibit to highlight current events, which was really important to us. So we want to know sort of where our exhibition program is going to go from here. We want it to be participating, engaging, and calls to action. We want it to be more than sort of Instagrammable moments. So as we are planning for upcoming exhibitions, we're really looking to develop our themes well in advance and look at the assets that the garden has, maybe even behind the scenes, to pull those forward and to really look at how the themes that we're picking are resonate throughout the world and current events. These are photos from our last orchid show where we did a light installation with Jeff Latham, and it carried visitors from one part of the conservatory to the other. It highlighted a space that was, needed some cosmetic interventions, and really became a spot that people that engaged with our visitors when they were using Instagram and other social media tools. This is an upcoming project we're working on. Our artist that we're working with, Yayoi Kusama, has historical ties to greenhouse production. And she wants to ask visitors to participate in creating an accumulation. This is flower obsession as shown at the National Gallery of Victoria in Australia. And this is, every visitor gets a set of dots or a set of flowers and is able to really obliterate this apartment space. And for us, we're planning to build a greenhouse and have visitors obliterate the plants and the greenhouse interior as tied back to Kusama's heritage north of Tokyo. And her family was a family of seed farmers and flower growers. So we're very excited about this, but we also want to make sure that the people that are participating are having more of an experience than just sticking a flower on the wall, and that they understand the context. So I think in wrapping up and giving Kristin her chance, we really are into developing strong themes in advance and very early in the planning process that help to guide our exhibition development. We really do a lot of research and background to support all our efforts. We're starting to take more cues from our colleagues that will help us to inform future exhibitions. And the goals are for visitors to take the extra step in engagement, to interact and create as a way to learn more and learn differently. We want to pull back the curtains on our collections that are hidden, show some transparency, allow visitors to engage and interact with different segments of our collections, books, specimens, rarer plants. And I think that I'm excited to see Kristin's presentation because we definitely have some work to do to really continue to pull down those sort of keep off the grass signs that botanical gardens are known for and really allow visitors to participate in the exhibitions. Thank you.
All right. I'm coming to you from Portland. Portland rests on the traditional village sites of the Multnomah, Cathlamet, Willamette, Tumwater, Clackamas, Wasco, Wishram, Chinook, Tualatin, Kalpuya, Malala, and many other tribes who have made their homes along the Columbia and Willamette rivers. We thank the descendants of the tribes for being the original stewards and protectors of these lands since time immemorial, while acknowledging the systemic policies of genocide, relocation, assimilation that still impact Indigenous Native families today. Indigenous people are still here and are still connected to and caring for this land. We are honored to be guests upon this land and committed to being good relatives. So I come at this from a public art space, managing public art projects throughout the city of Portland. And so I think I'm looking at this from a different sense and a different kind of participation than the botanical garden models. So I'm looking at the garden of civic space is kind of what I called it. Okay, so this is an ongoing project. Artist Buster Simpson, all the way back in 1990, pulled what he called host analog out of our watershed, the Bull Run watershed, which is an amazing water source that feeds the city of Portland. And we have really a wonderful quality of water here. It's a pretty huge blessing, and this artist wanted to highlight that. So the piece is installed at the Oregon Convention Center, and this is one of those maintenance plans that a public art manager loves, which says, don't touch it, just leave it, let it be. So you can see in time here, and I'm going to do the little time lapse here of how this piece has transformed. It actually moved from along one side of the convention center to another site. And then more recently, there have been renovations. So this right here is the condition of host analog right now. So his whole point was to pull this thing out of the Bull Run watershed and bring it in a highlighting way to the citizens of Portland, and show over time what what water does and what happens to a host log as it decomposes and regenerates and continues to feed the watershed. So this is where we are right now. It's been a pretty amazing project to watch. And, you know, I think it's perplexing for some folks that this is artwork. But I think that's part of the engagement and part of the intellect of the artist that reveals itself in the city landscape. Another project was a temporary project. This is an artist named Adam Cuby. He did the Portland Acupuncture Project, where he created these enormous 35-foot tall acupuncture needles. And if you're familiar with acupuncture, you're looking at different meridians and different issues, and you're trying to unblock energy within the physical system. And so he was looking at the city of Portland in a similar way, and selecting sites that would relate to different issues within the city. So this particular one was called Swimmable River. It was a kidney meridian, but it had to do with the safety of the river and the fact that at a certain point, the river was pretty toxic and is in the process of getting cleaned up. So each time he did one of these installations, he also brought community together to have discussions about what are the kind of planning related issues that exist on this project. And then another shift in this has to do with claiming space and who has been visible and who has been invisibilized within public space. So this is a project where I think you're probably all fairly familiar with the rocks with the plaques that mark the first house, or the first, at least they're certainly a popular thing in the West. So this artist kind of did her own version in a nighttime installation where she talked about the 150 homes that were lost in this location in order to make way for redevelopment and the new Memorial Coliseum. And along a similar line, a set of artists are working with our city archives, and they were interested in looking at the way the city had used policies and blight, which is where they come up with the term blightsploitation, to suppress and really remove the generational wealth from Portlanders. Portland has a pretty tough history of the way Black and brown people have been treated in this city. And the artists really wanted to highlight that. And it led to them actually discovering information about one of the artist's grandmothers, Mama Julia, who had bought this apartment building. And the city ended up seizing and bulldozing the apartment building through a blight set of she had a number of different charges against her for blight. They still owned the property, and through a pretty amazing process discovered that there was a new house. There was a house down the street, an historic place needing to be moved. And so they went to city council. They asked city council to waive all the fees. They cited all of the information that had happened in their previous experience. And in fact, the house did get moved. This is the site that it will move to. And they are going to turn it into what they are calling an archive, which will document much of the history and art of Portland's Black artists. So that is a little bit of a different turn, and that's sort of where I jump off.
Thank you both so much. That was really incredible to see all the different artisans that y'all have engaged with and the different ways that you've showcased the nature and advocacy for different aspects. So thank you so much for that. We have had some questions come in. And so I'd like to start off with a question from Holly Karras, who said, great information, Karen. Do you have a written exhibition policy?
We have a lot of different policies and we probably need to put something more formal together. We've had a lot of leadership changes at the garden in the past couple of years while the program has been building. So I think it's something that needs to be more formalized. So no.
And Kristin, have you ever worked with any sort of written exhibitions types policies? I know obviously you're not with a public garden, but in your other work, have you ever done written policies?
Yeah, I mean, for us, everything is about context. Like, so yes, we have some sort of general broad policies, but it's a pretty case by case basis based on what the context and what the role of public art in that location might be.
Thank you. So to move to the next question, this is also directed to Karen. And the question is, what is your exhibit's annual budget?
Annual budget ranges based on the year and based on how many exhibitions there are within the year, but all of the budgets are based on the potential revenue. So the revenue model is made before the expense budget is made, and it's based on how popular an exhibition would be, how many tickets would be sold, and how viable it is for fundraising before any money is spent on it. So knowing that something, you know, before I throw out a huge number and everybody panics, knowing that there's a certain amount of tickets that could be sold for someone to come and see Kusama, and that the ticket price would be higher than normal, and the exhibition would be more robust, that sort of is filtered backwards into building the budget. So some projects cost $500, some projects cost a couple $1 million. I think an average sort of exhibition budget for holiday train show, which is expensive, a full-scale summer show, an orchid show, and probably 4 or 5 gallery shows within that. And all of those exhibitions have 4 or 5 gallery spaces and cover the outdoor grounds, is typically about $3 billion.
Kristin, do you have any thoughts or regarding budgeting for exhibits or anything along those lines that you would like to talk on?
No, I mean, I am often working with, I'm given a budget, and then I need to design a project and a program based on the budget that is given. So that's a little bit of a different way. And obviously I'm always working on projects that have no admission. So there is no opportunity to recoup resources in that way.
So Elena, who actually was one of our speakers from the last Artists Activate, she asked, in Portland, what opportunities are there for the broader public to participate in nature-based or environmental public art installations?
Oh boy, it's sort of all over the place. And I would say one of our regional partners, Metro, which has a pretty huge parks and trails system, we're actually just starting a new program with them to because they just did a big bond, and so they have a whole new set of projects. So you know, at any given moment, I think there are a number of different things. There are a number of community organizations that are focused on Black and Brown people connecting more to nature. And I think that is a lot of what we are really working on, is trying to dismantle those systems of bias that exist in decision-making processes. Obviously, like from the blaxploitation example that I showed, there are ways in which policies have been used to preference certain audiences. And so trying to undo that and trying to really make sure that everyone is seen and feels comfort in the public realm is part of what we're trying to do. So not a super direct answer, Elena, but at any given moment, there are different projects. And of course, in this COVID moment, like a lot is on hold. So
as kind of a follow-up, how do you feel like both of you have had to adapt and change what art means or how it's interacted with or displayed due to the pandemic or the different events that have occurred during 2020?
I mean, we obviously high touch, and the idea of physically participating, I think, is sort of off of the realm of possibility for the next year and a half, maybe longer. So I think we've definitely been rethinking about that scenario. Our exhibition spaces in interior galleries are dependent on a very small and very untrustworthy elevator system. So the idea of trying to cram 10 people into an elevator car is much, it's much different in planning exhibitions now than a couple of years ago, when it was about sort of bulk and capacity and as many people as possible. And also knowing that maybe, you're not going to sell as many tickets because you have, limited capacity as based on a state mandate. It's interesting. So it's a lot of reworking of revenue models and things like that, and trying to think through HEPA filters and different sort of hand sanitizers, and what, sort of polling, well, what would you feel comfortable with and what would you feel comfortable with? So I think we have a lot of dreams to accomplish in the future, but some things are a little bit on hold as far as participating. We also don't have any volunteers back on site yet at the garden. So oftentimes we would have volunteers help artists to build artwork. And so that's not something we're working on right now. It's all outsourced.
Thank you, Karen. Kristin?
Yeah, and I would say for Portland, one of the big things that is on our horizon is, and this will be a participatory kind of endeavor, is that Portland had 6 sculptures come down this summer and early fall. So what happens next? Do things stay down permanently? One of those was an elk and was in the wrong place, and like it was sort of in a protest zone. The elk will likely go back. Probably everything else won't go back. But what are the next steps? How do we talk about memory and history in the public realm? Is the heroization of individuals something that we see continuing in the future, or are we honoring other things? And so I think for us, part of that process will be probably some temporary installations, and then obviously we'll have to do it in ways that are, people can be socially distant, but those are outdoors, so that makes it a little bit easier to do some of the socially distant endeavors. But that's a pretty big project on our horizon.
I think also we're very much looking at how our plants were collected in the late 1800s, how plants were discovered and named, what exists in our collections, how do we talk about that, how do we encourage diversity in scholarship of sort of explaining how our scientists are working in the field now, and how that differs from how scientists were working in the field 130 years ago. I think there's a lot of questions, and I think there's a lot of ways that exhibitions, specific artists can help us to showcase and explain and sort of change some of those practices.
Thank you both so much. I greatly appreciate you taking the time to do this, and for giving us so much information in such a short period of time. I would like to remind our attendees that a recording of this will be made available hopefully within the next 48 to 72 hours, depending on how quickly staff can move. And you'll be receiving an email with a link to that recording at that time. If you have any further questions for our speakers, I'm sure they'd be happy to answer them for you. So feel free to either email myself, or of course you can email them directly. You can find their email address. I think it was listed in maybe one of y'all's presentations. But if you want to email me, I can always redirect questions to Karen and Kristin. So thank you again all for attending, and thank you, Kristin and Karen, and have a great day.
Thanks, Lauren,
Thanks,
for
everyone.
organizing. It's great.